Sveicināti raidījumu ciklā Uzdevumi pirms dodies, droši darba ceļvedis Eiropā. Mani sauc Andris Segliņš, esmu Nodarbinātības valsts aģentūras Eiropas darba konsultants un šī raidījuma cikla vadītājs. Raidījumos mēs apskatām tādas praktiskas lietas kā darba meklēšana, darba iespējas, darba līguma nosacījumi un citas praktiskas lietas, kas ir būtisks pirms došanās uz ārvalstīm. Katrs raidījums ir veltīts noteiktai valstī, un šodien mēs runāsim par Beļģiju, bet detalizētāk tieši arī par Flandrijas reģionu. Un uz raidījumu esmu aicinājis Beļģijas Flandrijas nodarbinātības dienesta darba konsultantu Kīru Veldkampu. Welcome, Kīra, and thank you for joining us today. Let's start our conversation with overview of the labor market in Belgium. But before we begin, I know that there's a highly regionality in economy and labor market. Therefore, can you first tell us about general labor market situation in Belgium? And then we will go to more detailed information about your Flanders region.
Hey, thank you for having me, Latvia. And welcome in this session. I break down a little bit and starting from Belgium, because Belgium is at the heart of Europe. We're a small country in the middle of Europe, which makes it really easy to navigate from one to another country. But also, if you look at Belgium, we're closely to the sea, we're closely to the hills, not the mountains, but the hills. We're closely to a lot of neighbor countries, which has a lot of involvement on our local economics in the whole of the country. But very important to know is that the country is also divided into different regions, which also can inspire your choice to come to work and live in our country, a little bit depending on perhaps the nature or the sightseeing around it or the cultural differences. But most important, you have to know that there's also in every region an official language spoken, which means that in my region, the Flanders region, the most northern part next to the Dutch border or the Netherlands border, the Dutch language is the official language. Very important. If you, for example, feel more confident in an intermediate language like French, then the other regions like Brussels and Walloon might also be interesting for your choice of work. However, looking at our economic situation at this point, Flanders is the most demanding region. So most of the job offers are to be found in this northern part of Belgium. It's a very economic powerhouse. In Flanders, there's a high percentage of 77% of the people are working. And we have low unemployment, which means that there's a larger demand in that region. There's a higher unemployment in Brussels and in Wallonia, and therefore there's also less demand, which does not exclude that there might not be fantastic opportunities there. But again, it's a small country, so you could even choose to live in one part, in one region, and work in another, and easily navigate from one to another region.
Maybe you can mention some professional groups or business sectors where is most demanding sectors for employees.
Well, in general, for Belgium, we can compare our highest demand to most of the European country, which doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to find a good opportunity there, but you really have to look out and find a balance to what your competences are and what your knowledge of the language is, see if there's some kind of connection there. I would say that the most high demand, and which would be also the highest demand in the other region, but less in overall offer of vacancies, but the highest demand would be the sectors of engineering, so most of the STEM sectors, focusing on industrial installation technicians, for example, automation engineer, or also higher educated technicians are in large demand still. But healthcare is also still coming up, and various offers in healthcare, construction, mostly project management, for example, and finance is also still actively in high demand. Not only in the Flemish region, but you will find these professions also in the other regions. But for the Flemish region, these are the most demanding. And for the whole of Belgium, most interesting is also good to know that we do offer also seasonal work, mostly in hospitality in the summertime. And we also look out, and that's why I stress out for the whole of Belgium. There's also a lot of seasonal work going on in the agri sector. So depending on what fruit or what season it is for which plants, obviously that would vary also. It's also a good way to get to know our languages and our culture. If you would, for example, are a young student and you still don't know where to go or what to do in Europe, these could be also interesting in entrances through hospitality or agriculture to just get started.
You for value of the labor market. And then let's move on to the people side. If someone is interested to find some job opportunities, where and how job seekers should use some resources? Do you have maybe some platforms or websites you can recommend for job search, and especially in your region and Flanders?
Yes,
region?
of course. Again, for Belgium, most job offers are out on our public employment services. So for my public employment service, most job offers, however, in Dutch, would be out on the platform of the public employment service, the VAB. But also in Brussels, you could look for most job offers through their database, or in Walloon through their database. There's also a small region where there's German speaking involved, because we have 3 official languages, Dutch, French, and German. But for the job offers, all these job offers are also automatically uploaded in the EURES portal. So you could easily navigate through the portal of EURES and then dive into what's in Belgium. And if you don't want to choose a region yet, you could just go through with your hit words in English or in other languages and see if you find anything of your interest. But we do have, especially for people with a higher educated background, we would really underline to use LinkedIn as a resource. And for everybody, regardless your background, really look through your search engine directly to companies and sectors of your interest. Combine that with the region you want to go to and look into what they have to offer online, because a lot of job offers are not out there. So even if we are in a country where a lot of job offers are transparent and automatically resourced through our public employment service and also on the EURES database, most of the job offers are not out there. So we really want to emphasize the fact that you need to go from what you wish to do and you want to do and offer that to companies that might be in need, because we have 241 bottleneck professions and they are divided into multiple sections. There are so many opportunities. So one company could offer, for example, not the most vacancies, but there's always something there that's maybe in another sector of work or another sector of expertise that would be interesting for you. So always start with your interest and things you want to do. Look into the region you wish to work in, all the languages, all the culture that you think are the most interesting for you. And then just go through your search engine and look on the website then I would really ask you to just apply, because companies would be so grateful to have spontaneously applications.
Yes, I conclude then that means that job seekers should be active and then use not only available open job databases, but also be proactive and companies directly.
We do have a sub-portal called Work in Flanders, where you can easily navigate through just as a starting point from you are new coming to Flanders and our region. But the thing there is that it doesn't always give you the full overview on vacancies. However, there is a section there where we selected all vacancies that were already submitted into the database in the English language. So that could be a tip as well, to go and navigate through the English published vacancies in our database.
Thank you. And once someone found an interesting vacancy, the next step is to apply to employer. And what is your recommendations for preparing application? If we, for instance, talking about the preparation CV, what is the typical CV standard?
It's a great question and it's an important question, but it's no science. So there's a start direct application process, especially not to a country that is in the middle of Europe. Why? Because we are such a mixed culture. Everything is influenced by our neighbor countries or by for example, it's even different if you would apply to the Walloon region or to the Dutch region. Why? Because obviously, due to our language, we do have a different cultural background as well. the best way to approach companies is, again, look on their website, see what language that they use, and try to implement that in your cover letter. Now, in general, I would suggest to really try and focus on one application at a time and make the receiver feel like they're the only one, make them feel important. And also, what I have learned is that a lot of people from abroad, they put everything they know, all their competences into a CV, and especially for a small country like us, and sometimes companies who have to deal with a lot of job seekers, that's too much. You really have to tell them what you want to do in the company. So be a little bit bold and put forward what you want to do and what you think is the best missing link in the company, and that would put you forward a lot. Then I would also say, if you do not know any of our official languages, then don't try through AI to make a beautiful cover letter and CV in our language, because that's confusing. It kind of that you would be capable of communicating in a language, which chances are small that one you really knows the language. So therefore, I would choose or to use an intermediate language. For the Dutch region, use the English as an intermediate language, because in the Flanders part, we don't often use French as a language. Even if it's an official language to our country, it's not very frequently used, and especially not on the work floor. Use the intermediate language, but also stress in your CV that you are willing to learn the language, or you are preparing the language, or you have some notions. Just make sure that you have a connection with that. I must say that for some vacancies, you will not really need the language. For example, IT-based, engineering-based. I can imagine that you just start your job and English would be sufficient on the work floor. However, if you want to come and move into our beautiful country and you want to experience everything in that country that culture and hospitality has to use, and you want to integrate your family, for example, then it's a really good idea to get started in the language so that you not only on the work floor could be better in your communication skills, but also in your social and psychological life. You would be well equipped enough to be a communicative bystander for everybody else in our population.
Regarding application, quite often the job seekers ask, how about photography? Should a job seeker include photo on CV, or how it is in Belgium, or maybe difference between regions?
Well, you can also see from the way I'm explaining things that there's so much possibilities. Again, there's no strict science in that. I can imagine for some jobs, but I think that would be not specifically in Belgium alone, that it might be interesting to know if you are a clean and fit person to do that kind of work. However, we also concern photographs to be discriminative in some sense. So we do not really have especially when you do the CV digitally and not through a platform where there's already a photograph from you on there. But on the CV itself, you don't have to. It's not really our habit to do that. However, if you use LinkedIn and you don't use a photograph, that's also a little bit weird. So it's like, if you use LinkedIn, then do try to make a professional photograph, or even if it's a little bit in the background and something around you, make sure that's inviting. Doesn't have to be attractive, it needs to be inviting.
But it depends also in what way you are applying. If you are using social media,
Definitely.
then it's better to keep your photo. If you send just a CV electronically, it's not so typical practice.
No, and we're also a really big fan of the use of Europass, from CDFOP, that provides the necessities to create a beautiful CV where you have all the schablons and all the standards already built in, and which helps you really navigate through all the topics that need to be or could be covered on your CV, and you choose your own chronologic. If you use an intermediate language, sometimes I trip on my words, but if you use the right chronologically that you choose of your choice, You can save that, you can use the library and you can recreate it. You can use several languages. So I think that's a beautiful tool to evolve also when you get started on your CVs. And even the layouts are pretty flexible. So even there, you don't have to use it in a certain kind of way. You can choose your own layouts.
Another question people quite often asking about foreign languages and local languages. If I'm searching a job in another country, you already touched this, that in Flanders there are also possibilities with English language. But how is generally, what is the need for this local language? That means also it depends on which region you are searching for a job. But how about other maybe regions, Wallonia, and especially in Brussels region, there is confusing which language to speak in Brussels if you would like to find some job opportunities.
It's actually a great question, especially because we're divided in so many language sections and it makes it sometimes a little bit complicated. I want to say that if you are looking for an educative job or a professional recognition job, then language is of a great deal because you need to choose in what region you want to work because your administrative recognition has to be in that language region. So that's one thing. For example, you want to be a doctor or you want to be a teacher, you will have to choose one of the language regions and you will have to apply and you will have to have a certain knowledge of that language. For all the other job opportunities, I would say that there's as much a demand for a official language in any of the regions as there is for competencies, especially in the Dutch-speaking part. Of course, every employer wants somebody who speaks Dutch. That's normal. That would be in Latvia just the same because that's the easiest way and it just saves you from a lot of trouble. It gives somebody who's new on the work floor also some kind of outstanding possibility. And it's always easier. However, the competences that companies need are in such a big demand that language is sometimes overseen and that we do adapt to the fact that there are so many jobs you can also execute in an intermediate language. Also, if we talk about specific sectors, then for example, IT and engineering, a lot of working environments are built up in English. So then the necessity goes less. If we look, for example, to the capital city where there's so many jobs on an international level, for example, or there's so many CEOs or main office or head offices, headquarters are based in Brussels. There's also the European institutions, the European Commission, Parliament, etc. Then I would say if it's a job in the Brussels area, the most demand is for people that can combine Dutch and French. But that's just for the Brussels area and basically all the jobs in any kind of sector. But if you would go and address to a job for the European Union, then there's a whole different level of what the necessities are concerning your knowledge of languages, because then most of the job vacancies for the European institutions already ask for multiple language knowledge for certain functions. So it depends a little bit. If you go to Wallon, then it will be important to speak French in general, because we do notice that it's comparable to the French, to France as a country, that they really hope that newcomers can start in the French language as soon as possible. But also there are some job opportunities which you could address to in English as a second language.
Thank you. And let's imagine someone has a job preparing to move to Belgium. What should do the first things when you arrive in Belgium, some registration procedures and so on?
Well, first of all, go to your Latvian EURES advisor and make sure that you're prepared before you go to any other country in Europe, because it will help you from any bad surprise. But then when you do arrive in Belgium, normally there's some kind of a regulation that says you have to subscribe to a local office within 3 months, but try to first focus on the main thing, and that is trying to get a social fiscal number, because you need a social fiscal number to be able to start to work. However, in Belgium, So that's not only for Flanders, but that's for the whole of Belgium. It's the employer who gives you the social fiscal benefit number. They will ask it through a digital portal, and it's there in 24 hours. So when you have an agreement, it's built into the HR area or time that you have to complete all your administration. You can have a social security based on your current address, so even on your Latvian address, but you can also have it when you come to Belgium and you would subscribe there. Now, according again to European regulations, if you do subscribe first before you have a job, sometimes it gets a little bit administrative complicated. So it will be easier if you're not living in the capital because it's so busy and they are really this way or that way. So very 0-1 kind of situation. But if you go and you work, you would apply to the office in a local office in countryside, for example, you would have much more flexibility. You can have an appointment. They will explain it better to you. And so if you do want to subscribe before the 3 months, just to make sure that you also know that administration sometimes gets you back and forward if you don't have a job when you want to subscribe in the town. However, it's the employer who will ask for the social fiscal number, and that's something you really need before you get started. And then if you are in your onboarding periods with your new employer, make sure that you somehow agree to have some administrative time for yourself, which means the administrative time to get connected to a health insurance fund. In Belgium, we have a very particular situation. From the old days, you have to choose a health fund, which is or a socialistic health fund or a liberal or a Catholic or an independent. So, but it doesn't have to do anything with the services they provide because they're basically exactly the same. But it's from the old days where you had to choose between one of the big ideologies to get your social security started. So don't worry about that. If it is confusing, I know it's really weird, but it's more difficult to get it out of the system than to slowly just make it neutral in any aspects. So you'll have to do that and make sure that you create some time within the first starting period of work to be able to do that. And then also if you integrate your family and children, I think it's also a really good idea to look at the portal Make It in Flanders, because this gives you an overall on everything you need to take into account when you get started in Flanders. Housing, family, schooling, what to do with your partner if they have extra needs to get around easier, or health needs that need to be provided. Everything is on that starting point, your future in Flanders.
We can say that it's a better option if you have already employer and job opportunities, and then this registration process is more convenient and more fast.
It's always like that, because I think in a realistic situation, it's easier if you have that security of already being able to start. However, that doesn't mean that you're not welcome to job opportunities. And in a lot of cases, it's just perhaps your character or your competences that need some more close and personal navigation through our local labor market. So you're also welcome to come to us, for example, if you want to take your unemployment benefits with you and look for work for 3 months. I'm sure that in our local public employment services, they will help you out in finding the best traject to get started in the Dutch language, to get started in leading you on to the best job opportunities in the sector that you want to do. So there's also a lot of alternative if you don't have a job at forehand, but it's always easier.
Yes, and if you start employment, then of course you have to fulfill with the employment contract. And let's discuss about contracts and working conditions in Belgium. And my question is, what types of employment contracts are most common in Belgium?
Well, we have actually a very strong labor law situation, which means that you are sometimes our employers complain, something that you hear also sometimes in the news, that our labor are very strict, which means that, for example, all our wages are agreed upon in the collective labor market agreement, which means there is no possible way that for a job that you do, you would be completely out of the box or you would be wrong. in some kind of situation. You could be minimum paid, but it would still be in the reference of what is legally protected. So this is really important. That's also why we're one of the few European countries that are not very transparent with our wages. So you will not find a lot of wages out there because we have to learn to also put them out there. I think it has to do with our background that we're very careful because we need to look in the book exactly for that kind of function. How much does somebody earn with that much years of experience? So we are getting into it. It will be more and more transparent. But especially if you come from abroad and you are used to your wages in Latvia and you want to compare it, please be open about it. So if you already introduced yourself as being a foreigner that comes new into Belgium, somebody who's a good HR or a good employer, they will know that one of the questions on the tip of your tongue is, how much am I going to earn? And let's talk about it. And is there any possibility to make it a little bit? Because you can always agree upon. There's also some flexibility within the agreed upon. Also, important to know is that we have about 20 paid working holidays. And depending on your age and your experience, the sector that you work in, there's also some extra days. So it can only get better. For example, if you work for the government, you have 35 days of paid holiday leave. And there's also 10 bank holidays or public bank holidays extra. And what's good to know also is that I think it's pretty exclusive for Belgium, but we have an automatic indication of wage against the inflation situation. And there's a legal minimum wage at this point. I think it's about 2,189 euro gross per month. But that's the complete minimum wage. So that doesn't even compare to what the wages are in the various sectors. And we also cover most of our sectors and most of our employers cover extra standard benefits like what we call meal vouchers. It's actually a voucher that you get for every working day that you can use that for anything that's food related. So going to a restaurant or paying your groceries with it. It's very normal. Everybody uses it. But it gives them an extra balance to give you something more. And also we have in most of the sectors a 13th month bonus, which means that you have your 12 months, of course, paid, but then you have an extra bonus, as we called a coverage of a 13-month, which sometimes is the complete 13 months, so a complete wage extra. So we don't. Also, sometimes, for example, if you go to the bank and you need a loan to buy a house, then you can show that you have 13 months and not 12 months to present. And this is on top of your paid holidays or your holiday or vacation money that you get. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there, and it's not a limited list.
Just to clarification, in Belgium, employment contracts are legally already written, yes? Or there is also
that's a good one also.
option.
They are legal when they're written, yeah. So we do say that somewhere in labor law, it was so that if you are agreed upon a labor contract by saying it, that would be binding as well. But because this has no legal base, if you have to go to court, we say a contract is binding when it's written. So yes, it needs to be written. And also important, a contract has to be in the legal or the official language of the region where you're going to work in, because otherwise it's also not binding. You can have a translated contract, but it's not the binding contract. It's the original one that's binding. But that's only in case it ever comes to court, then it will be the original or the official language one.
Job is one part of relocation, but another important and equal part is finding accommodation. And how and where should people should search for accommodation in Belgium? And is it easy to find it?
It's rather easy to find. In that sense, again, Belgium is a small country, which means that you can also choose not to live in the area where you work is. Easy. You can, for example, find a job in the capital, but then still choose to live in some other city, which is more of your favorite. Because I think it's really important, again, we still have that choice that it's very important for you, again, to see what you want and where you want to live. Maybe you don't like the city and then you just choose to live anywhere else. It's just so easy to navigate from one place to another that you can exclude that cost also a little bit. Because if you choose not to go to the capital cities, obviously that would change the financial aspect of it also. And we have so much choice that sometimes, for example, in an important city street or in a much visited city street or a popular city street, you can have one house and another house in the same street, which one is out of your price class and the other one is totally in your price class. Obviously, that would change the amount of space, etc., a little bit, but you can still choose to still go and live in the area you want to as well, because there's always a possibility, there's always a chance. If you compare to our neighboring country, this is a very exclusive situation because we can still offer you so much choice and there's so much ways to go. If you want studio or you want co-housing or you want to rent an apartment. I must say that renting at this time is also a little bit in debate because lately we have less big market for renting spaces. There's always something to buy. So there's a lot to buy. But for newcomers, of course, renting is very important. So just don't focus on the idea that you have to live in the same areas where you work or nearby, because it's also easy to commute from one place to another. And perhaps the choice of renting out is there a lot bigger.
And how do you recommend to find some accommodation using some agencies or maybe some websites with rent applications, or how do you recommend?
Yeah, of course, if you use an agency, there's a price. There's always a price tag to use an agency. It's really interesting, but it doesn't guarantee you anything, because even if you work through agencies, they can't, even if you pay a fee, they can't guarantee you anything. But for some people in some professions, I think in a management position, or if you really have to go fast, then I would recommend any agency. Most of our agency have a recognition. I don't know of any bad situations there. So you could just navigate on the internet and see if there's any interesting agencies. But there's also two platforms which are really, they are dominating the market, but they also have the most extended information, not only on what's out there, but also on, for example, extra legal access. What do you need to know when you rent a house? Did you know that you can have, for example, there's a subsidized scheme when you are a newcomer and you want to rent in Ghent, for example, an apartment. So they offer you information on the whole housing market, what's interesting to know if you want to rent, or what's interesting to know if you want to buy, or if you want to renovate something. They offer that on their pages, and they also offer you everything that's out there. So most of the people who want to outrent something or want to sell a house, they also use these two platforms, and it's Imoweb and Zimo. These are the most frequently used in the region of Flanders, but they are also used for the other regions. I do think if you want to dive into the possibilities or the interesting websites for the other regions, it's good to contact my colleagues from the other areas as well, because they probably have more information on what's interesting. Especially for the Brussels market, I think there would be, of course, other interesting sites as well, because it's also more difficult to go live in the capital, and it's very expensive to live in the capital. But again, there's no need to live in the capital.
And I would like also to ask about everyday expenses, and maybe you can just mention some examples of typical prices, for instance, for a cinema ticket, for some meal and restaurant, and so on.
Yeah. And this is something I was thinking about. It's also something that we always do when we, however, I think it's really difficult to compare to a country with like Belgium with a country like Latvia, because structurally and basically historically, there's been so many changes on costs in general, and especially what is getting more expensive or what is getting less expensive. The second never happens, but what is getting more expensive. Now, in general, because we have so much choice in things like housing, for example, but also like what you want to do for culture or what you want to do for leisure in your free time. You can choose to do expensive things and you can choose to do free things. We offer so many free things, sporting, culturally, that I know some of my family members, they make it a sport to find everything cultural that's for free. So there's just so much choice there that we don't really have to compare that situation. But if you really want to know, cinema is not cheap anymore. And that's because we have so much streaming. Going to the cinema is not, I don't think it's so much pleasure as it used to be. And it's just really expensive because generally a ticket is between 8 and 12 euros, depending on what cinemas you go to. And the big cinemas, they offer an experience, of course. But the nice thing is that we do have some reviving of small cinemas, like the really cultural cinemas. They're, in comparison, not that expensive. So they're more to the 8 euros price. They offer a wide range of fantastic cinema from all over the world. And you can take your drink, even a good Belgian beer, into the cinema, which is also really interesting as an experience. But further than that, we have so many festivals. Perhaps you heard about Tomorrowland, which is a very expensive one. But there are also a lot of comparable festivals which are not so expensive and also very interesting to check out. And dinner or food or in general eating out or eating in, groceries, also because we have such a various choice, then I would say just be smart about it. Don't use the Sunday opening big store or mega store because it's just way more expensive. But I think it's very comparable to every other country. But just find out in your new area where you're going to live what is most interesting for you and your budget, because they do compete a lot. And we do have our Aldi and our little markets, and we do have the big other markets, which is something that you can choose from. And in any area that you live, you will have most of the choice opportunities as well. Concerning eating out, same thing. We have tourist traps, which means that in all cities, there is a variety of restaurants which are really expensive. And especially because we have such a food culture, because we're in the heart of Europe and we make a fusion of everything. So you can find every kind of food. Probably there's a fantastic Latvian restaurant in the heart of every city, just because, we get it involved everywhere. But I would like to stress out that we have these tourist traps, so be careful there. Just ask around as soon as you get your network going what's interesting to go to, because a lot of locals, they know where to go to, and then it's a lot cheaper, and sometimes a lot cheaper, but much worth for your money. Also, of course, if you eat traditional food or food with stars in stars restaurants, it will cost you a lot. But we have because again, we're such a good fusion. We have so many southern and eastern small priced, fantastic restaurants. You can really get your heart out there. Yeah, a lot of choice again. So because there's so much choice, you can make the balance in if it's really affordable or not.
Yes, you just told that you have a lot of choices regarding the food and the attraction and so on. And to conclude our conversation, how would you sum up life and work in Belgium, and why do you think people enjoy most about living there?
I think even though there will be a lot of countries that will say they do better in it, I think we have a fantastic work balance, work and life balance combination going on. Because, the proximity of everything, or to extend your work and then to your privates and see, but also because there's a lot of flexibility on the workflow. There's a lot of integration from sports and activities on the workflow, but also, there's so much to choose from when you are in your spare time or in your leisure time, what you want to do for sports, if you want to go to a club, or if you want to do social activities, or you're more a creative person, there's always something for someone anytime. So that's why I think it's a fantastic life-work balance. And also because if you have family, they have also needs. And for them, probably there's also so many other opportunities. Like for when your kids need to go to school, we have such a fantastic schooling system. Again, look out, because if you go to the city, it's a little bit difficult to have the school of your choice. But if you go outside of the city, there's more room, there's more space, and there's less children in one class. Also there, we're in the heart of Europe, which gives us the benefits of having everything there, of having the heart of this European institutions also, but also to be able to navigate not only to other countries very easily, but also the rest of the world. Brussels is the capital of the world. I think, yes, I have to say it that way. And it's just so easy to navigate. And also, I am so enthusiastic because I think I have a good quality of life. Not only me, but also people I know in my social network and people that I meet every day on the work floor or the clients that I work for. So the exception is there, of course, that there are so many people who don't have it that well, but we still have a very good quality of life in general in Belgium. And I would say, yeah, healthcare, everything, culturally, gastronomically, it's just great to be here. Sometimes when I go on a holiday and I come back to Flanders, I'm really happy and grateful that I live here because all the choice. Yeah, definitely.
I will say thank you very much, Kira, for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge and your advice.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Paldies. Paldies arī mūsu skatītājiem, kuri piedalījās mūsu raidījumā. Un, ja jums rodās kādi papildus jautājumi par darba meklēšanu vai dzīvošanas nosacījumiem citās Eiropas valstīs vai par starpvalstu nodokļu un pabalstu jautājumiem, tad aicinu sazināties ar mūsu nodarbinātības valsts aģentūras EURES konsultantiem. Un vēlreiz paldies un uz tikšanos nākošos raidījumos. Visu labu!